Some of you, if we haven't met before, I'm Jill Geisler. I'm the Bill Plant Chair in Leadership and Media Integrity at Loyola University Chicago. I've been a friend of the Media Project's fellowship program since it was launched, and that was quite some time ago. And have just been privileged to be with you to help develop leadership skills for you to lead from wherever you are. My background is broadcast journalism. I led a newsroom for the better part of 25 years, a television newsroom, helped develop a culture there that people said was a foundation of ethical journalism and journalism that that took on issues, not just events, right? And it was a place where people could actually be themselves. And if they were parents, we could celebrate the fact that they had families and lives. And that was really important to us. I think that message is more important today than ever before. The pandemic has caused so many of us to take a look at what truly matters. We know our mortality, we know our spirituality, we know our family values. We may have lost people we love, or had time to be closer to people we love because we didn't have anywhere else to go. And so in many cases, it's caused us to reflect. I hope it's caused us to want to become better leaders, because all of the things related to the pandemic, to societal issues, to social justice issues, to the changes in the political environments in where we live, in some cases being very detrimental to journalists, threatening to journalists. All of those are a real call for leadership. And leadership does not necessarily mean telling people what to do or being the smartest person in the room, right? Because if you have a title of manager, yes, you are expected to make decisions, but the best decisions come from good minds working together. So that's why I want to talk to you today about coaching. And the plan for today is for me to do a little foundational teaching about coaching to show you a model for how it works. And then we will actually practice it. We'll do a demonstration, and then we're going to break you out into small rooms so that you can practice sort of safely in a little private environment where you can give it a shot to see how it goes. It'll be probably 3 or 4 to you to a room. We'll come back and talk about that. If there's time, we'll do it again. But that's the plan. So I'm looking just to make sure. Daniel says hello to everyone. Hello to you back. Elasta says, I wish everyone found this week special and that in whatever we all do will be great and awesome. Oh, Brenda, open doors. May your prayers be answered. And Carolyn, oh my goodness, I wish everyone the courage and strength to be able to remain true to the true calling of journalism, withstanding any pressures and challenges of the fast changing media landscape. Comfort wishes everyone renewed strength for the work we do, right? All right, that's a great start, everyone. So let me pull up the PowerPoint and stand by 1 second while I do that. Okay, we will get that while I put whoops, we've got to get one more person entering the room. It's always so much fun to do screen share. All right. Are you seeing a slide, everyone? Okay, yeah. I'm good. So let's get going. So as I said, the goals for today will be to really help understand the benefits of coaching, to explore the coaching versus fixing challenge. And I just realized as I talked to you about this, I need to pull out one piece of paper that I need to refer to. So hold on. Okay. And to learn a practical method for coaching called QUEST, Q-U-E-S-T, to experience coaching, to build skills, and actually put a plan together for using them. So here we go. I want to know if this sounds familiar to you. Someone comes to you and says, got a minute? Could I ask you something? Of course, everybody says it'll take a minute. It usually takes a lot more than that. But they ask questions like this. Oh, two of my team members aren't getting along. I've tried everything. I just want to talk to you about it. Or I've got an idea to streamline our process, but I'm not sure how to pitch it. And I'm afraid nobody will listen to me. Or, boy, there are three good candidates for a job in our organization, and we really don't want to mess up who it's going to be. And, or something like, could you take a look at this memo? Could you eyeball it? Just look at it before I send it, right? Those are all the kinds of things that people come to you as a formal or an informal leader with questions about. And oftentimes our instinct is to jump in and fix the problem for them. You know, we're good people. We want to be helpful. So we'll say, tell you what, just try this. Or, you know what? I had that same issue. Now here's how I handled it. Or here, let me do it for you. Now, a lot of us are the here, let me do it for you, right? Whether or not that's two people aren't getting along and we need somebody to resolve it, or this isn't written well, and it's faster for me to rewrite it myself than it is to show you how you could or talk to you about it. So here's a better option. You coach rather than fix. Coaching is guided discovery, and you are the guide. Fixing is telling people what to do or just doing the work for that person. And there's a big difference between fixing and coaching. Fixing is faster because you get the person out of the room, out of the way. They ask you a question, you give them an answer. It's instant, they're gone. If you take someone's work out of their hands and do it for them, it may be faster than taking time in that moment to talk through it with them. So in fact, coaching is slower. However, fixing is focused on a problem and solving that problem. Coaching is focused on the person. How can that person grow? And quite frankly, how can you build your relationship with that person in the process, right? You're not just giving them an answer and sending them away. You are helping them discover. And as a result of that, getting to know them a little better and they you. Fixing is usually based on my ideas. Here's how I would do it. Here's how I think you should do it. Here are some answers coming to you out of my head. Coaching is about teasing out your ideas. Let's talk. What are you thinking? What are your options? What could you do? And it doesn't mean I don't have ideas as a coach. In fact, I may have a lot of ideas. They could be right or wrong based on how much I know from what you have told me. But I'm going to make sure that the emphasis in this conversation is on pulling out your ideas, and we'll talk about why. Fixing directs people. It just says, go this way, do it this way, and particularly my way. Coaching engages people. It says, how are we going to make this work? Fixing, while it may be faster, is temporary because you are actually training people to come to you for answers, not to learn to develop them themselves, not to learn to develop a skill, but just to come to you. So it's temporary. I fixed something for today, but I actually am guaranteeing that that other person will come back. I haven't made a permanent shift in their ability to decide or solve a problem, right? Or improve a skill. I just took care of it in this moment. That's why it adds to my workload, because people keep coming back. When you're supposed to be doing your work and work that only you should do, they're coming back one more time for a solution that you could have helped them learn to develop themselves. That's why coaching ultimately, though it's slower at the beginning, can reduce your workload because people are now more self-directed. Coaching, or fixing rather, tends to take one skill, telling people what to do, rewriting something, editing something, giving an order. Coaching takes multiple skills. You have to, if you're going to help someone be a better writer, you have to be able to deconstruct what good writing is all about, put names to the pieces and parts of it, figure out what that other person's patterns and habits are that get them into the habit of unclear writing, right? You just don't say, this doesn't work for me. Similarly, coaching, which we'll talk about in decision making, takes a number of really good skills, which we'll talk about. Because the good news is we can learn those skills. Even if you're in a habit, a bad habit, I can just tell you that if I could learn those skills, anyone can. Let me take down the PowerPoint for a second and tell you, I have to admit that I'm a recovering fixer. When I was in my newsroom, you could put a piece of copy in front of me, any piece of copy, and I thought my job was to put my fingers on it and make it better. I was the news director, but I did it even before I was the news director. I did it when I was somebody's colleague. If they'd ask me for advice, I'd say, just a minute, give it to me. And then I would do it. When I became the news director, I was 27 years old. I was leading a newsroom of people who were, many of them, old enough to be my parents. I wanted them to believe I deserved the job. And how could I persuade them of that if I didn't have the answers? If I didn't prove to them, if they came to me with a problem, I had a solution, right? And I thought that was a good way to lead. I will say that after fixing people's copy, I did find myself frustrated. I can recall myself walking around saying, how come these people aren't getting any better? I fix something, and then the next day I see the same issues in a story. And what I realized is that when we work in the production line that is a newsroom, someone will give you their work, and if you change it, they're often on to the next thing that they're doing. They're not watching everything you do. They, in fact, may not see the changes. You're acutely aware of every change you made. By the time they see the next version of the copy, they're perfectly happy with it and thinking, okay, that's the way it's supposed to go. I do the first draft, you polish it up. This is my work. That's good. I'll go on, and tomorrow I'll send you more to do that way. Or if they are very good writers, they are frustrated because your changes in their mind weren't as good as what they had done. And they've given up even telling you about it because you're a powerful person, right? So that was going on. That's that idea of, we were literally, as a fixer, you train people to rely on you as their first draft or as the fountain of all important decisions and ideas. Sometimes they don't even come in with a suggestion. I'm thinking of these two things. I'd love your input. No, they're just coming in and saying, what should I do? Because I trained them to do that. So being a fixer like this, I was invited from my newsroom for other reasons to come to the Poynter Institute, which those of you who've been there know it's a beautiful nonprofit school for journalists and media leaders in St. Petersburg, Florida. And Poynter puts on seminars and they bring in guest faculty. Well, they brought me in from my newsroom on a number of occasions to teach about things that we had been doing on ethical decision making and culture and things like that. And while I'm there for the seminar, I'm sitting in on all the other sessions. And one of those sessions was about coaching and fixing. And as they described people who would take the copy out of other people's hands and change it and make the decisions for them and really be a terrible fixer, I realized for the first time they were describing me. And if I had any arrogance about being invited there as a guest faculty on something, it kind of all went away as I heard myself described as the worst example of a fixer instead of a coach. And I just wanted to hide under the table. And I was truly humbled. And I made a decision in that moment that I was going to become a coach and stop fixing. And I was so bad at it that I said, I'll have to have a mantra. And my mantra became, sit on your hands. If I had to sit on my hands and I couldn't touch copy at all, I could only talk about copy, what skills would I have to build? If I couldn't just point people in the direction of things that I wanted them to do or say or respond to, how could I help them discover their way? And so that became the beginning of a journey that I continue on to this day, because I'll tell you, you show me a piece of copy and I still, my fingers tingle, right? And now as I coach people all the time, I more instinctively will will use coaching skills. I now understand how to apply those skills and have them be more natural. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But at first I want to know, am I the only fixer or recovering fixer in the room? Would you raise your hand if you too have a tendency to fix? You can either physically raise your hand or use that little hand raise option under reactions. Let's see how many fellow fixers we have. I see Carolyn, I see Jennifer, I see Lekan, I see. All right, you see what I'm talking about. It's very common. And it's common because of our sense of responsibility, right? It's not because we're trying to rule the world. One other reason it's common is because we have a dedication to quality. And interestingly, when we do it ourselves, it always meets our standards, right? So, as a result, let me pull that PowerPoint back up and screen share. Here we go. All of these always just take a moment to get into the mix. Okay, here we go. So why is it important to learn what we're going to learn today? Here are the benefits. When we coach, it encourages people to take responsibility for their own decisions. It enables people to actually come up with their own ideas and solutions, and it reduces our need to fix their problems or process or products. One thing to remember is that people fall in love with ideas and solutions of their own creation. So I picked this little example. If you're the one who finishes that puzzle, it's your puzzle, right? It just makes you feel really good. I teach this to managers all the time. If you think about how often, if you have an idea and you're proposing it to another group of people, frequently their first response isn't, oh, what a wonderful idea. Their first response will be, well, you know, that there could be a problem with this though, because we are sort of hardwired as human beings to be problem focused, especially during change. And I can just tell you, as someone who was in a newsroom when we moved from typewriters to computers, that there were people who literally said to us, oh, what if the electricity goes out? We can't go to computers. We would lose all of our ability to produce. It was one of the first things that people said, rather than, oh my gosh, think of all the things that could be done. There were people who literally resisted wanting computers. I can recall telling people at the Poynter Institute when I joined the faculty there in 1998, that you have to get an email address. And there were skeptical reporters going, well, I don't want the whole world sending me messages that way. I can tell you that there was a time in which we told leaders while they were there at the Poynter Institute, don't wait until your normal publication or broadcast time to share a developing story, post it on your website. And their first response was, well, our competition could see it then. They weren't thinking about whether or not the public would see it and whether or not it would make them a valuable service for people wherever they are. They just started thinking of the problems, because that's what humans do. We are risk averse. And if you know that, it will make you a better leader, because you won't assume that someone is argumentative or negative or problematic unless they never say things positively. But you'll realize that when someone pushes back, right, that they're going through risk aversion. They're trying to think of how not to fail. And when you think about how it changes when they have the ability to put their ideas into the mix, you'll see why coaching works. Let me ask you, have you ever, let's say you were in a conversation with your supervisor, your boss. You came in to talk about one thing, you had a good conversation, and during the course of that conversation, you found yourself volunteering to do something. And as you walked out of that room, you said to yourself, wait a minute, how did that happen? I did not go in there thinking I was going to volunteer for this project or task force or to write something. How did it happen? And then you realize, you sort of rewind that story and you say, okay, it happened like this. I came in to talk to my manager, and then the manager said to me, listen, can I run something past you? I'm thinking about putting a little working team together to talk about how we can do a better job of getting things posted to the web. And you say, oh yeah, you know what, that's been a problem. You know, one of the things I've run into is this, this, and this. And then the manager says, well, what do you think we could do to expedite that, to fix it? And then you say, well, I have 3 ideas, really. I would do this, I would do this. And the next thing the boss says, wow, that would make you a great voice on this team. And you say, okay, I'm in. And it now changed, because if somebody had just put out an email that said, I'm looking for a working group, you'd kind of look at your calendar, and in fact, you'd probably say, I've got other things to do. There are probably better people than me. I don't know if they'll listen to me. But just by that very opportunity to have your ideas in play, you volunteered. And I guarantee you that this happens all the time. It is how you as a leader, again, from wherever you are, who are trying to get people to join in on something. You need to have a vision, and you need to leave space in that vision for them to envision and suggest its execution. People want to know that as a leader, you've got a vision for what we can be or where we can go, but they don't want it so buttoned up that they don't have a voice. And I've learned this over the years on any project that I lead. It is giving as much space, having as much structure for people who need structure, but having lots of space for autonomy, for voices. And it really is a delicate balance that you have to learn, and you have to know the people you're working with. And as a coach, this is the essence of what you do. There's actually a study that was done here in the US about how people, there's a store called IKEA, and IKEA is this big store in which you buy things like furniture, and it's pretty inexpensive, but you have to put it together yourself. And the researchers from Harvard did a study that asked people to value certain items. And it turns out the things that they built themselves, they put a higher value on than things that they bought pre-made. And so they called this the IKEA effect, how much we value things that we've been a part of. So I tell you all of this to really underscore that coaching isn't just about being nice or having good conversations with people. It's about being effective. And this is why I'm going to tell you about a model, because as adults, we want something that's easy to remember. We don't spend our time memorizing and taking tests and all of that. We want a good, what we call a mnemonic device to keep in mind. And this is the one that I will give to you. The coaching model, the process, is called QUEST. And QUEST stands for question, understand, explore, suggest, and trust. Now, let me explain each one of those QUESTs. The questions that coaches use, and the question is the most powerful tool you have. Remember Q before A. Somebody says to you, hey, can I ask you something? and you want to jump in with an answer, think before you give an answer about whether or not you know enough, and consider asking a question. Questions should be open-ended and non-judgmental. Now, open-ended means they are questions that aren't answered by yes or no, or by a number or a date. They are things that expand people's point of view, vision, give you more information. And they should be non-judgmental, so they don't sound like they're accusatory or in any way. Sort of the difference between if I said, so Melissa, what were you thinking when you did that? Because she's come to me to talk about, I think I made a mistake when I was talking to Josephine. I think I may have hurt her feelings. And I may say something like, well, what were you thinking when you said that? And that's an open-ended, non-judgmental question compared to, what the heck were you thinking? That's a little, there's a little judgment in that question, right? So here are some examples. How can I help you? Opens up the door. A simple question like that, if you come in and say, boy, Jill, I am really worried. I think I really messed things up on an assignment I'm on. And I say, how can I help you? Instead of saying, I know the answer, if you feel bad, I already know the answer. By asking, how can I help you? You will determine where their greatest sense of need is right now. You're not going to assume it. When they've laid out a problem, instead of saying, here's what I think you should do, you're going to say, what are you considering? Because it gives you an idea of the way they are thinking, right? You don't want to blow past what they're considering. They already might have the right answer. And instead of you telling it to them, you can validate what their right answer is. You can say, can you tell me more about what led to this? Oftentimes somebody will come to you and say, that's it. I think I want to quit my job. I am just so frustrated. Just one more time. I feel like I haven't gotten the assignments I need. And I'm going to tell my boss I'm going to leave. And instead of assuming that everything they just told you is the full story, you say, can you tell me more about what led to this? You can ask people what else is going on. Many times they will tell you a slice of a story, and you know that there's a much bigger picture to know before you give them advice. So asking them what else is going on at work, what else is happening. They may tell you about a person who, this person's work is just fallen off. They're not doing as well, or they're not communicative anymore. And they may say, I think this person is just developed some really bad work habits. Well, that could be. But you're going to say, what else is going on at work? What else is going on with that person? And you are again learning more. And then another open-ended question is something like, well, what's important to you? So someone just says, that person who said, I'm going to leave, you could say to them, well, I don't want you leaving before you have another job, and that would be bad. But you're going to ask, what's important to you? Because it gives them a chance to show more of their heart to you. And then you may say, and what would be the negative consequences of leaving right now before you have another job? And that opens up the conversation, right? So all of these are open-ended and non-judgmental questions that help you and the other person discover more. Then somebody says, okay, I got an idea. I think I could do this. And you say, well, what's success going to look like? And the reason is that sometimes people have an idea of a next thing they're going to do, but you want to push them even farther to say, so tell me what it'll look like if it all goes well. So those are open-ended and non-judgmental, but as they are saying all of those things to you, as you're having this conversation, if you're not a good listener, if you don't listen to understand, you won't be a good coach, because many of us, especially those of us who are extroverts, listening is waiting to talk, right? It isn't taking in information. It's just waiting for that other person to stop doing this so I can jump in now. And you have to become really good at training yourself to be a much more focused listener. I'm going to ask the group, let me just pull my window up so I can see you. Who in here has been told you're a good listener? Can I get a volunteer who's been told you're a good listener? Daniel, can you give us a few tips on good listening?
Yeah. I mean, basically trying to understand from their viewpoint of what they are going through, and just listening to understand, as you rightly said, that would open up doors to or give an opportunity for them to um, talk a lot more. Then you understand what the problem is.
Right. And are there some things, even if you're in the room with the person, that you do intentionally when you're face to face with someone and want them to know you're really listening?
Yeah, maintain eye to eye contact and acknowledge what they're saying. And at times you just say that, I hear you. This sort of things would help them to just open up even more.
Yeah, thank you. That's perfect. And it's a little trickier, when we're here on Zooms, because it's easy to, to sort of not have a person feel that you're so intimately connected to them because we're at a distance. So we have to remember to work even harder. And we have to remember in person or on Zoom, not to clearly look like we're distracted. Just a second, I just have to look at my phone here, or I'm going to look at my watch here. I gave a tip years ago that if you have an office, if you are a person who has an office in your organization, put a clock in your line of sight so that when someone is talking to you, even if you're a little concerned because you have a meeting coming up, you're never doing this, looking away like this. And I also will tell you how much it means to people. Have you ever been in a room with someone where their phone rang and they said, no, I'm not going to take that. You're more important. And it was like, whoa, that was telling me something. It's your opportunity to tell someone. Or conversely, if someone comes in and they need to talk with you and you're going to get a call, you may say, I'm going to get a call. I will need to be interrupted for this. And I just want you to understand that it is not, I wouldn't do it unless it were important. And again, it telegraphs respect to the other person. So when you are doing this careful listening, you restate what you heard. I'm hearing you say, I'm hearing Daniel say that he makes eye contact. I'm hearing Daniel say that he always gives people their full attention. He restates to them. He says, I'm hearing you. So I just restated Daniel, right? So I heard him. You also can reflect. You may say, I noticed that you emphasized when we were talking, and this is why you're listening carefully, right? Someone is telling you a story about some concern they have. And several times they have talked about the fact that this problem happened on deadline, right? And you may say, I noticed that you emphasized deadline several times. Let's talk a little bit more about what happens on deadline. So you're listening carefully, sometimes for things they don't even know they're emphasizing, right? But you're listening so carefully that you notice, and you can say, you said deadline here and you said deadline there. Can you tell me more about that? And then you're just wanting to be absolutely sure. Now, let me check if I'm clear. Here's what I heard you say. Do I have that right? And when you do that, it really makes the other person know, lets them know that it matters. Now, when you get into the reflection part is not just restating, but it's the impressions that you are getting from what you heard. It sounds to me like you're concerned about this. Is that true? And because sometimes you can't tell if someone comes to you and says, they changed my story. I don't like the way they changed the story. And I may say, you seem concerned about accuracy, or you seem concerned about the process, or you seem concerned about this person consistently doing it. You really want to focus in on what it is so that you're on the same page. We all hear through our own filters, right? So you want to make sure that what you're hearing is what they want you to hear. But even if they want you to hear something, it doesn't mean that it's everything you need to know. In fact, it rarely is. This part, the exploration part, is the most important for you. Once you've used the question, which is your power tool, once you've listened carefully, now you employ your critical thinking skills. And your critical thinking skills are analytical. Because I am prepared to tell you that in most cases, the first story you hear from someone is not the full story. It's the story they have been telling themselves that they've edited. And in most of our stories, we are either the hero or the victim, and someone else is the villain. And that may be true. However, there's more to every story. And if you respond to the first things you hear, you may be giving wrong advice. So what you need to do is look for information under the surface. You need, even as you're talking to someone face to face and you care about that person and you're giving them full attention, you have to think about other stakeholders. Who else is in the mix, seen and unseen, of what you are talking about? If someone comes in here and says, listen, we have had such a problem with people showing up late, I think you need to put out a memo and tell everybody you've got to be here on time. And if you hear that and you may think, well, that I can understand this person's frustration, but I'm going to ask a few more questions. And it may turn out that it's only one or two people who are doing this, but the person who's talking to you doesn't want to have a conversation with them. They just want you to put out a memo. And as you're considering other stakeholders, you're saying, what's going to happen when I put out a memo and 98% of the people who receive it are coming in on time? Are they going to feel like they're being talked down to? They're being criticized when they really haven't done anything. They come in on time. Have you ever gotten one of those memos where you get it and then you go, well, who screwed up? Because I'm really ticked at getting a message that tells me to do what I'm doing because somebody hasn't talked directly to the person who's not doing it. So always consider other stakeholders. This is where you are, right? And then you have to imagine other logical explanations and things that may be happening. I spend a lot of time in my coaching helping people understand that while they have come to a conclusion about the motives of other people or the motives of their organization, that they may be right, but there may be other logical explanations. For example, if someone comes in and says, I just wish we wouldn't keep secrets around here. I mean, there's somebody who's been off for 2 weeks and nobody's even told us why. And I mean, that's just an example of the bad culture here where they don't tell us what's going on. Well, you can imagine another logical explanation, that person may be having a health crisis, that person really deserves privacy. And you are the person who can say, can you imagine some other reasons that people would not share personnel information other than wanting to keep you in the dark? And it helps the other person come up with some answers rather than you saying, well, let me tell you why, because there are some times you just don't deserve to know. And that doesn't help make a good connection, right? And you can also surface assumptions and biases in what the other person is telling you. I need to tell you that for all of the years that I was at Pointer, we would often have people bring in what we call difficult conversation cases. And people would write them, and confidentially, we'd share them among the group. And one of the reasons that I began to be so concerned about people learning to coach is that I saw how easily people in a group, in an effort to support each other, would take at face value what the other person said. So they might write something like, I need to have a talk with Daniel. Daniel's been here longer than most people, and he thinks he doesn't have to follow the rules other people do, just because Daniel is more of a veteran. And then the rest of the people in the room would jump in and say, well, here's what you ought to tell Daniel. Or they'd say things like, yeah, I've got somebody like that. Well, I was sort of surprised because I think in their effort to be supportive, they didn't ask good questions. They didn't say, tell me more about Daniel. Tell me what he's done well over the years. Tell me what's going on in your organization right now. Tell me a little bit about the way it looks when what do you mean by he doesn't have to follow the rules? And we begin to narrow it down to, it turns out that perhaps Daniel wanted to work a 4-day week with longer hours during the day instead of a 5-day week, but the characterization was completely different, right? When the person came in and said, Daniel doesn't want to follow the same rules. So what I'm finding is that maybe that business about he's a veteran employee, there's a bias that people will automatically say, yeah, well, senior employees, they don't want to change and they want special privileges and they want to have it easier. And I'm saying, is that true? Or where's it coming from, right? So we have to be able to, this is the hard part of being a coach, is helping the other person sort of figure out where their piece of the mess might be. And you have to do it in a way that doesn't sound like you're unkind to them. So this is a critical part of the conversation. And then you're looking for aha moments and opportunities where the other person, because of your question, says, wow, I hadn't thought of that. It could be, what if I did this? And there's your moment, right? When that person has an aha moment and they're getting in the right direction, you say, okay, then where do we go from here? Now, sometimes people still don't come up with good ideas, right? They may have a good idea and you're suggesting, wow, you could do that. Okay, let's talk about how. But if they don't, you say, what are you thinking now? You're sort of moving them toward closure. What are you thinking? Well, and they say something like, well, I don't know. The last time I tried talking to that person, it didn't go well. You're telling me that it's not going to get better if I don't do it. And that's true. And I don't know if I'm going to do it. And I'll say, what's the worst that could happen? So I'm nudging them toward, that's a suggestion, right? What's the worst that could happen? And I may at some point say, well, what if you tried this? You've said several things. What if you tried this? The difference is I'm doing this now as opposed to right at the beginning, right? And you may say, is it possible that? Or I've heard you say this, so here's what I think. But this is the last resort, okay? It's not that your ideas aren't important. Your ideas are really important when they validate the other person's thinking, or when after you have tried to help them come up with good options, they couldn't. Now is when you step in. And then the last part is trust, which is actually turn the responsibility and the work over to the other person. So something like this, a good coaching conversation can be done in 10 minutes. If you get good at it, you just sort of learn to automatically do it. And still, even 10 minutes of your time, you don't want to waste. So you want to make sure the person follows through and that the two of you are clear on what's going to happen next. So asking something like, what are your next steps? What are you going to be doing? You're now closing this deal. You might ask, who could be your ally in this? If you know there are other stakeholders and you say, you want people to really be collaborative, asking a question like who could be your ally is a great way of underscoring the importance of collaboration. If you really want to make sure they get it done, what's your deadline? Or what's your backup option? But one of the other really important things to say is, please let me know what happens. And the reason I say that is that it's a very nice coaching way of saying, I'm watching you. You've told me you're going to do something. I want to hear about it, right? But you're being very kind about it, but you want to know what happens. And in fact, if you think this is a person that you've invested time with, and then they won't follow through on what you and they have decided, then you'll say, please let me know what happens. How about next week, Tuesday? Because then you are actually making it a time commitment. Coaching helps us widen the lens. This is what a person often brings to you because they have narrowed their focus to what they think the story is. And it's this little tiny house. You are interested in knowing a bigger picture so that if you're talking about that little tiny house, you've got much better information and a much broader view. So I want to tell you a coaching story, all right, before we actually do our practice. I often tell people in workshops and, in my columns and things, if you ever run into a problem and you want to talk it through with someone, feel free to reach out to me. And they do. And one day I got an email from an editor. I'd never met her. And the email basically said, I'm not a great boss. And I proved it today. I was really frustrated with one of my writers who's a veteran, who is reaching out to me for advice and answers on everything. And I'm just tired of it. He's been here over 20 years. I don't have to be doing all this answering for him. And I was so frustrated, I sent a note to my boss about it. Only I didn't send it to my boss. I accidentally sent it to the reporter I was complaining about. Now, at this point, right, if you're getting that email, you're thinking a couple of things. Oh, you've got to do an apology. Here's how to do an apology. But again, that's narrowing it. That's based on only what you've heard so far. The email went on to say, I've ruined it, haven't I? I mean, I've ruined it with this person. And you want to say, well, no, you haven't ruined it. And you can say something like that. But then this letter went on, this email went on to say, I never really volunteered to be a boss. The writer said, I was promoted to editor at a time when our organization was under a lot of I really wanted to improve diversity. And I am a Black woman. So my boss was able to say, the way she wrote it was, improved it by 2, by a woman and by my being a Black woman. And I try my best and I work really hard, but my ability to ruin someone's day like this is just keeping me from wanting to get out of bed and go to work each morning. So like, wow, now that I hear this, the first part of the story is I made a big mistake, right? The second part of the story is I'm not sure I want to be a boss. Now I'm going to admit my bias. I am not going to do a lot to push any Black female editor out the door before I know for sure she doesn't want to be an editor, or I really know for sure. So I'm going to like hold on that. So if you had received this email and you wanted to be a coach, what would you do next in response to the email? You can either speak up or type it, whatever you wish. What would you do? Where are my volunteers?
You guys can unmute your mic and speak or raise your hand with
Sure.
the icon or post in chat.
Yep, you can do any of those things. What would you do if you got this email from someone who was reaching out for some type of feedback from you? There may be a temptation to say, to respond in an email, here's how to make a good apology, right? But unfortunately, that wouldn't tell me enough. I mean, I can always tell people how to make a good apology. But what I did was send a note back to her and say, it sounds like you've had a really rough day. So that's sort of a reflecting on what she wrote, right? That's what I'm reflecting on so far. But nothing that you can't recover from. That's encouragement. Would you like to do a call? Because I really believed I needed to know more. So we set up a phone call. And again, this was a complete stranger. And so when we talked, I said to her, can you tell me what's going on? And she said, yes, this veteran is just sends me constant questions about his stories, constant questions about decisions. And he knows better than this. And I said, what do you think the reason is? And she said, laziness. Now, remember I said your critical thinking skills should kick in? Laziness, if you hear someone do a character reference, right? That's an easy answer. Character things are things that we often do when we just want to stay mad. You know, somebody interrupts me a lot, I'll just talk about them being rude. I won't talk about what they do or anything else. I'll put a characterization on it. So when I heard her say lazy, I thought, that's too easy. And it could be a little biased. And so I said, I did what I call a counterintuitive question. I said, can you tell me what this person does well? Which I really like to do when someone is telling me about someone who is problematic, because it causes me to listen with critical thinking about how well they do or don't give that person credit for what they do well. If they're so emotionally involved in proving their point that they're wrong about something, right, that they won't give them credit for anything they do well, it tells me a little bit about the speaker. So I said, what does this person do well? And she said, that's the thing. He's won awards. He's really good. And so as I heard that, it causes you as a critical thinker to say something else is going on. So I asked the question, can you tell me what else is going on at work these days? And she said, wow, it's rough here. We're a really small newsroom. We've gone through several rounds of downsizing, and it's terrible. I mean, we've lost really good people. And I said, so how have you adjusted? And she said, well, you know, we just believe in just good journalism. So we've tried to do everything we've always done in the past, and we come in and give it our best every day. And I said, that is a lot of pressure on people, isn't it? And she said, oh, it is. You know, I realize that everybody here is tired. And I said, can you tell me a little bit about your boss? And she said, oh, my boss, he's really burned out. You know, we're a small newsroom. He's got a desk right in the middle of the newsroom. And when he doesn't like something, he'll just yell out, who wrote this crap? Only she didn't use crap. She used a more colorful word. And I said, okay, so let me tell you what I heard you say. You have a veteran reporter who's won awards, who's a good writer in many ways. Who's now coming to you for decisions on everything. You've had several rounds of downsizing. I didn't get a sense that you know that downsizing is over. You have people who are doing as much or more work as they've ever done before. And you have a boss who screams when people don't work to his satisfaction. And she just said, oh my gosh, do you think he's just scared? And I said, what do you think? She said, I bet that's what it is. I said, well, what kind of priorities have you set with your reporters about, you know, what things they need to do more of or less of now that you have fewer resources? And she said, you know, I really haven't done it. We just keep our heads down and work. But boy, I bet I could do that. I bet I could talk about, you know, what the priorities are. And I said, that sounds like a good plan. When are you going to do it? And she said she was going to meet on Monday. They were going to have this meeting. And I said, all right, please let me know what happened. So it wasn't so much about me teaching her how to make an apology, right? It was really about what else was going on. So you want to know how that story ended? Let me pull my screen back up for you. She wrote me an email afterwards because I always want to know how it happened, what happened. And here's what she wrote. He and I talked Monday morning, and it was actually almost pleasant. I apologized for the way he learned about my frustration, but said I wanted to use it to give us the opportunity to talk. He didn't even convey anger about the fact that I sent an email about him to him by mistake. He said I was always a fair manager, and he just figured I was stressed. Surprised me. He then surprised me again by saying he thought about what I had written and realized I was probably right. Whoops, got to get my, whoops. There we go. He came to the understanding that he should trust his experience and judgment and remember that I do too, and not to be afraid of making the wrong decision. That happens too. We learn from it and move on. So I said to her, so you sent this email to him by mistake, and he forgave you and learned because of your reputation as a good boss. And she said, yeah, I guess I'm a better boss than I thought. So think about it. If I had jumped in and written just a response as a fixer, here's how you make an apology. Here's how you talk to your managers if you don't want to be a manager anymore. I would have missed this story. And we may have had one less woman of color in a leadership role. Because what happens on our worst days when we make a mistake? Whatever imposter syndrome we have kicks in the biggest possible way. And that could have been happening to her in that moment. So as a coach, breaking apart two issues, what you did and how you feel about yourself as a leader, are two different coaching conversations that, if you merge into one, may include too many assumptions, right? And she stayed on as an editor for many, many, many years. She's no longer in journalism anymore. But I think this is an example of how easily, if we're fixers, we could give the wrong answers and the problems would still continue. Remember, the first story isn't the full story. And I don't mean to say that people are lying to you. It is that we are human beings and we narrow the story. We fill it with our fears, our experiences, our concerns, our assumptions. And as a coach, we may find out that every single thing that that person is saying is right, but we do it because we know a fuller story. And we learn how to do it in a fairly short amount of time. So now it's time to practice coaching. And I'm going to pull down the screen share. And I'm going to ask, is there anyone who would like to talk through an issue, a challenge, an opportunity, something you would like to talk through from a coach, with a coach, right? I'll be your coach. And then the rest of the group watch to see whether I do question, understand, explore, suggest, trust. Do I have a volunteer for a coaching conversation? Have I scared you?
Late, but if you want, I can.
Oh, great. Let's do this. All right. So how are you doing? What's going on?
Great, Jill. Thank you. How are you?
I'm great. What do you want to talk about today? How can I help you?
Well, I have a problem of, people don't take me seriously.
Tell me more about that.
Say you're pitching a story idea, it gets shot down. Whereas if somebody else says the same thing, then it gets accepted.
Can you tell me more? What's your story pitching process like?
Well, I try to make it in a gist, in typical television style, in 2 or 3 lines. And I also always conscious of the fact that there are too many people in the call. You shouldn't drag it and make it longer.
That sounds like a good thing. So you're doing these on calls. You're not doing them in person, right?
No.
Right. And so during these calls, everyone gets a chance to pitch?
That's right.
Okay. And you've tried to make yours fairly concise, which you know is helpful. Brevity is helpful. Can you give me an example of how you would pitch a story? Let's say one that you've pitched recently.
Well, okay. I should choose something which makes sense to all of you. Okay, it's about the impact of the pandemic, and one particular district in our state is known for manufacturing or production of crackers, fireworks, and the festival of Diwali is coming up, and for the second consecutive year, they've been facing huge losses, lack of opportunity, and this year it's also a kind of a double whammy for them, because the court has intervened, saying that you guys produce crackers which violate the pollution norms, and you didn't really comply with the kind of formula we had given you to make them less polluting. So in a nutshell, this means it's going to impact around 8 lakh people who depend on this industry for their livelihood. If these crackers are not sold, then it's going to hit them hard.
Okay. And so you pitched that story, and the editors did not engage. They didn't think it was a good pitch.
Yes.
Okay. Have your editors recently talked about their audience or their targets or their strategy or what they are who they're trying to reach? Is there something going on in your organization about targeted audiences?
I think we don't have that kind of a very clear policy as such, but
Mhm.
and it also keeps changing. Sometimes we try to reach out to the audiences in cities, the educated younger population,
Mhm.
and sometimes suddenly we may find the ratings not doing well. Then we may try to focus on issues which could strike a chord with, say, rural population kind of thing. So the story which I'm trying to pitch is largely a kind of a rural area centric.
Mhm.
This would also mean we may have to travel. This would involve flight tickets, hotel stay, plus a cab hire. All those things.
Mhm.
It's not something that happens at a backyard. Of course, that could be one major reason, because it's pandemic time.
Sure.
The company's revenues have been hit hard.
Ah. So I'm hearing you say that that your ideas have not really been embraced the way you would like. That the company doesn't have a real clear strategy that you're trying to connect your stories to. It'd be helpful if you did, and those things would match, but it changes. But you also said there's some economics involved with this. And that seems like it could produce an opportunity, because the question I would ask you, and many times, remember, I said people are problem centric, oh, that would cost a lot of money. We'd have to go there. When you are making your pitches, are you taking into account optional ways that you could cover this without travel?
Yes, but at a time like this, these stories ought to be reported from the what we call as on the ground. So there's
Right.
no. I
No,
mean,
I
we tried to,
understand.
yeah.
I clearly we all would prefer to be on the ground. If it means a story or not a story, some organizations have figured out how to do things from a distance using using
Stringers, yeah.
a stringer, a citizen journalist, social media, and then you apply your wisdom to putting it all together. I want to go back to something you said, though, and it really stays probably most prominently in my mind. You said they're not taking me seriously. What do you mean by not taking you seriously?
I think one gets a sense that sometimes if it clicks, if they like it, yes, it's not based on what the other person tries to project or what he or she finds it important. But
Mhm.
ultimately, what gets accepted is what they think they need.
Mhm.
So half the time we may get a sense that it's not going to work, that kind of a that kind of a thing. Whereas there could be something which is less serious. We may think it to be not so important issue or a story, but they would like it, and by all means, they would be generous to get things done.
Yes, I just heard in what you said that they're not taking me seriously, that it was that something is really hurting your heart in the way that they are rejecting your stories. And I'm curious about the difference between having a story rejected and really feeling like you personally aren't taken seriously. Is there really a pattern to things that you are seeing that makes you feel you are not being taken seriously? Or is it the way that we as journalists feel when our ideas don't get accepted?
I think it's partly both ways. There are times where stories get accepted too, but the larger pattern is ultimately, does it strike a? I mean, do they find it interesting from their point of view?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, since you work on the ground, you may know that this is a story which we have to tell. this is important for our audience kind of thing. But they may
So
not look at it that way.
it's always so discouraging when our stories don't get picked up and our ideas
Yes.
don't get picked up because we believe in them. Tell me about conversations you've had, especially recently with editors that aren't in meetings, about story focus or how you could potentially be more successful. What kind of conversations have you had?
I think we don't have that kind of a formal sessions actually.
Mm. Is there a possibility that you could initiate conversation with your editor to get a little bit more focus or understanding so that you're getting a sense of if a story has been, if you've had two stories that story ideas they didn't take, is it possible to have a conversation with an editor that says, I really want to make sure that my pitches are really meeting our needs, and I noticed these last two didn't do it. Can you tell me a little bit more about how I could have shaped them? Is that a conversation your editor would be willing to have with you?
I think we should give it a try. Yes. Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen?
Well, I mean, nothing to be that kind of, nothing nasty as we could imagine. No,
Okay.
It's going to be cool. Yeah.
Okay, it's a pretty understanding person. You're not
Yeah.
dealing with a dragon or
Yeah.
anything. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm hearing you say what sounded to me like a great idea for a story may have been shot down because of the concept, the way it was pitched, or the expense. We don't know for sure. So you and I are kind of guessing, and one of the guesses is they don't respect you or they don't take you seriously, and that may not be the case at all. And the way to get a better sense of it, may come from your conversation that just kind of gives you a better sense of direction, and again connects you a little more closely to your editor. I heard you say that it doesn't sound like it's a risky thing to do to get that additional information.
Right.
When might you do it?
We should give it a shot. Yeah.
All right. Will you let me know what happens? Right. Okay, everybody. What did you see in terms? Thank you so much for doing that, this exercise and being so open. What did you see, everybody? You can put it in the chat room, or you can open up your, did you see coaching? Did you hear me? Did you hear me say, I know exactly what you should do? Daniel?
Yes, obviously, I think that was a very good role play. And I think to reiterate what you said, the first story is not a full story. I think first expression would be driven by emotions, and you kind of feel, you bring out your hurt, and you try to justify and convince the coach your point of view. So in between trying to do that, the entire elements, the facts are missed out. So I think you did a wonderful job by listening to the whole story and bringing about and cross-checking with the facts.
Were there any, before I go to Josephine, were there certain things that you learned from the questions that caused you to go, ah, wait a minute, that's another layer to this, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
When we heard about the fact that travel would be involved, then a part of us said, well, maybe there's an option here. And my really deep concern is that when someone says, I'm not being taken seriously, then that's a real, that's a shadow that's cast over them coming to work every day. And it could be that they take him very seriously, but that's just the feeling that he has. And we need to sort of sort out the difference between being taken seriously and needing to have my story pitches hit the mark, right? Yeah. Josephine, you were going to say something?
I just listened to that conversation, and I realized sometimes your conversation with Sam Daniel, I realize sometimes is the approach and the language used, like you said within the quest on suggestion. Yeah, it's good to leave the person use language that will lead to them opening up and really feeling like they are not off, like giving suggestion and say, what if you tried this? I've heard you say this. So here's what I think. I mean, let them bring out what they think. Don't cut them off and kind of like throw their story out of the window. I think that conversation makes the person feel like they have a point. They see their story, even if it wasn't a strong story, they can see their mistakes and they will understand. I think it's all about the choice of words, the conversation, and how you really converse over something. That's what I felt was coming through.
Thank you, Josephine. You know, the critical thinker in me says that when someone says, I feel like I'm not being taken seriously, there's more to that story too. There may be ways in which the organization either routinely makes people feel unimportant, you know, how they reject story ideas. I have often said to people who are doing writing coaching, you know, somebody comes to you with their story, it's like a baby in their arms, and they say, you want to take a look at my baby? And the person goes, whoa, ugly baby. You know, that's not what you want to do, right? That's the same thing for people's story ideas. You know, you want to be able to say, okay, for a number of reasons, that one's not going to work because of expense and because we've done something like it before, or I just don't know that we're going to have the time to do it. Rather than just, no, that's not going to work. And so it becomes really important when you're hearing that someone feels as though they're not being taken seriously. I hope that you have sort of the emotional intelligence that triggers of empathy that says, let's separate out how they're making you feel and explore that if we need to, from the process by which stories are pitched. Those are two important things. And Carol says, tried to understand before responding, asked open-ended questions, gave him suggestions instead of a direct answer. And you'll notice the suggestions came when I asked about a conversation, you know, when was the last time you had a conversation, or could you have one? That was lower, right? That wasn't, Daniel says, you know, J. Sam Daniel says, I'm feeling disrespected, and I say, well, go talk to your boss. You know, I could be sending him into the lion's den, right? I need to know more before I make that suggestion. Thank you, Josephine. And David said, restated the conversation. So there was, and Jacob just says there are a number of reasons stories are rejected, business interest of the owners, particular news meeting, right? And those are the things we try to tease out in the questions. So thank you so much, Mr. Stalin, for being my victim in this exercise. Now, what I've asked Melissa to do is to set up some chat rooms, right? Some breakout rooms. And the idea is, I would love to have you, oh, Comfort, you got to leave us? All right, goodbye. And it's a joy to be with you. What I'd like you to do, in each room, we need one coach who's willing to practice coaching, and one person, I don't like the word coachee, I always use the word star, because I want a person who's being coached to feel like they're a star. Like nothing is more important than the conversation with them right now. And so we have a coach and a star, and then everyone else in the room will be the observers to see how it goes. Jennifer wants to say something. So before we do that, let's hear from Jennifer.
Jennifer, you're muted.
Okay. Jill, you know, I understand exactly where Sam is coming from. In the culture that exists here, there's no question about having this so-called discussion with the editor, you know, about why, please, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't work like that. And I see that, I can feel Sam's hurt here, because how are we going to, as reporters, become, you know, toughened up by this feeling of rejection? I mean, I'm thinking of a story I did so many years ago that still hurts. 3 blind women living alone in a home up in the hills, in the wilderness, which I thought was a fantastic story. And I went ahead and did the story. It was never, ever aired. 20 years later, I feel I'm upset about it. So there's no question about asking them, why didn't you take my story? It was so beautiful. Oh, shut up and be quiet. What's tomorrow's story? You know?
I
I understand.
please, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah. Please, sorry, Jill, I just wanted to say that, it doesn't work like that over here.
And it's interesting because I heard you say, calling someone to say, why didn't you use my story wouldn't work. And I think that is important to know, especially if it's culturally that people don't want to get that kind of pushback. Reframing that to say, I noticed that a couple of my ideas have kind of fallen off the table. Any advice for me on how to have them do better next time is a way that still acknowledges the power dynamic of editors, but it's future focused instead of explain to me why. And I don't mean to diminish the heartbreak that you felt in having such an important
Yes.
story, but I think
Yes.
we have to know the environment we're working in. And so if it is a very hierarchical culture, then you frame it not in terms of a challenge, defend your position in not running my story, but how can I make sure my story can meet the standard next time? And so it's as a coach, it would be important for me to know the cultural dynamic at work. And I'm glad that you emphasize that, Jennifer.
That's why I brought it up. Thank you, Jill.
Yes, thank you. So now we get a chance to practice, and you get a chance to be together in a smaller group and make some good contacts. So Melissa is going to put you into breakout rooms. Again, my request is that one of you volunteer to be the coach, and the other person who has either a real or a hypothetical situation they are dealing with. It can be a challenge, a problem, an opportunity. You might be thinking about taking a new job, or you may be thinking about how to spend some budget money that you have, and you want the other person to coach you. And the rest of the group will observe, remember the question, understand, explore, suggest, trust model. And then when we return in 15 minutes, we're going to hear how it went. I'm going to ask the coaches what it felt like to be a coach. I'm going to ask the stars how their coaches did. And I'm going to ask the observers, what did you see that you liked? What did you see that we could learn from? Are you ready? Everybody good? You're going to go into your small groups now, and we will see you in 15 minutes, which will be my time, 38.
Okay, Jill, do you want to just say real quickly, once again, we just had a couple of people join in the past
For
minute.
those of you
Yes.
who've just joined us, we have been teaching a coaching model. People have practiced it. It's called QUEST, question, understand, explore, suggest, trust. I'm going to pull this up and put it back on the screen. Let's see, let's find it. Oops, sorry, everybody. I'm just going to go back to that model so you got it in your brain. Okay, look at how fast I can go backwards on slides. There it is. Okay, everybody can see it. That's the model. And if you jot it down right now, and again, there are times that someone says, no, just give me the answer, right? And you're going to do it. We'll talk about that. But we're now going to break into small groups. One of you will volunteer to be the coach. One of you will be the star. The rest will be observers. We'll have 15 minutes, and when we come back, we'll debrief all of you.
Perfect.
So take good notes, observers. See you in 15.
Okay, great. I'm going to, when you're divided into breakout rooms, you just have to opt to go into it. So we'll see you soon.
By the way, Jennifer, I'm just seeing a headline from ABC News. Foreign nationals traveling to the US must show proof of full vaccination.
It's the 8th.
Starting November 8th. Yep.
They've announced the 8th, so that means how do we come to the meeting? We can't.
Yep.
They'll have to go ahead without us probably, or whatever. I don't know about the other countries. Is it about all countries, Jill?
It says foreign nationals. Are you vaccinated?
Yes, we are.
Oh, if you are, then you're fine. It's those who aren't starting November 8th, I think, if I understand that right.
No.
Hold on.
I don't
Oh,
think
no,
so.
no, it's if you're fully vaccinated, starting the 8th, you can join.
Yeah, that's right.
Got
So
it.
8th is
Got
the
it.
date. So
Yep,
that means no way.
yep. Too bad.
Okay, so everybody be sure to click that you can join your room because there's some rooms open. People haven't joined yet. So
Oh,
Bampo,
4.
Florence, Jennifer, Chica.
Yes, okay.
Brenda. Okay. Perfect. Mary and Jill, sorry, you got stuck. You got put in one, but obviously don't go. You're fine.
That's okay.
David, you can join. Just click on join room. You can go in there with Paul and Josephine.
There we go.
Jacob, if you're able to hear us, you can click join room and you can go into the room. You're in there with Jennifer and Daniel. To move Apollonia, we're going to move you to a breakout room and then we'll share with you what is happening there. Yeah, we have a few people that dropped off. So we have like one room with quite a few and then another with only 2.
Almost got everybody. So David and Bampo, maybe they are away from their desks.
Yeah, maybe so. That room number 2 is packed. Never know
Oh,
how it's
good.
going to end up, but room 4, at least it's Jennifer, so she can.
Sure.
hopefully
And
Pat
you
Daniel's
know,
been
even if
doing-
it's packed, they'll have a good conversation. And oftentimes we can't tell what people are talking about, you know, if they've actually decided they're going to do the model or if they have other things that are important to them to talk about. And if this group connects as a result, I'm happy.
Okay, Giselle is saying the light has gone. Her electricity is out at her home.
Oh, no.
So she got dropped off.
I think we'll have time for only one. And I thought this is the last session of the week.
Yes.
So you or Paul want to do some type of summary. So I should leave a little time. I just see Jacob saying how wonderful it was to be part of the conference, but I'd hate to have this just end without you having a signature voice.
Yeah, we could do that. Yes, for sure. Excuse me as my power just gave me a notice. My laptop is about to turn off. Just one second. Yes, no, we can definitely do that. Just hide this so you don't have to see me.
Great.
Bending over.
There
So-
won't be time for a second one, so.
Yeah, that's fine. There we go. So Giselle's trying to get back on. Let's see what happens. Daniel says, take me to the room. What that means. Daniel, I think you have to select to go to the room. You've been invited. Do you see on there where to select? Join breakout room?
You got it?
Did you get it? I think so. Okay. Yes, perfect.
So you might want to send a note to Paul if he's, I don't know if he's in a breakout room or not, but you could send a message just saying Jill is going to leave 5 minutes at the end, maybe. Oh, here's Giselle.
There's Giselle. I'm going to send Giselle. Glad you're back. Well, I'm going to assign Giselle to Giselle. Welcome back. I'm going to assign you to a breakout room with Jennifer. I believe that's room 3.
Good evening.
Hi,
Giselle, I miss
Isa.
you. I miss you, my friend.
Hi. I
Good,
lost
my
my
little
laptop
sister.
at home.
So Giselle, I'm going to send you to the breakout room with Jennifer, okay?
Okay, here it is. Okay, thanks.
Just select it and you'll go.
Okay,
You should get the
For-
invitation.
room 4.
Room 4, yes. Okay, I'll message Paul. So do you have big plans for the weekend?
I'm teaching in the Journalism and Women's Symposium JAWS camp that's going on. I'm doing something tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
Writing a column.
That sounds
Uh,
like you got a few things.
Yeah, a few. Getting ready for 2 classes I'm teaching on Monday.
Oh, wow.
What else?
Yeah. That sounds like a lot, Jill.
Just, yeah, prepping a few things.
Nice. You know, this is my first time back in the city since COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
What's it like?
You know, the city is bustling. From what I had a meeting yesterday at Columbia with a student there, and you know, she was just saying, even in the past 4 weeks, it's really changed. Like if you were around like Labor Day weekend, it was much quieter than it is now. It's still, it seems very, I mean, as far as the foot traffic and the subway traffic and car traffic, it's very much feels like New York. But the thing that is heartbreaking is seeing all the storefronts that are empty, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I had lived on the Upper West Side for 12 years. And so many of the favorite restaurants and, you know, just stores that had been there, you know, 20 plus years that are signs in the window for lease. So
Wow.
that part's to be expected, obviously, but still heartbreaking. Edith joining. Hello, Edith. How are you? Jill,
I'm
did you
good.
meet?
How are you?
Good. Jill, did you meet Edith? And was it 2016, Edith?
It was 2015.
2015. Okay.
Good
Yeah.
to be with you again.
I'm going to transfer you to a room, Edith. Okay. To a breakout.
I
They'll
was
just
in
be there a
room
few
3.
minutes, but you can at least join for a few minutes.
I was already in room 3. I don't know how I got
Oh,
kicked out.
3?
You got
Perfect. I will
kicked
send
out.
you back.
Ooh, what'd you do?
Sending you back.
All right.
do you think they have about 5 more minutes, Jill, or less?
No, 5, because
I'm
we
gonna
took
put
a
a
little
minute.
while to regroup, so 5 more.
5 minutes left.
All right, let me redo the PowerPoint to where it should be.
Right.
Let me get everyone back. Actually, I'll take it down, but okay. Now I am set there. Okay.
So when I close the rooms, they'll have 1 minute to join. You think I'll
All
give them
right.
about 30 more seconds, then I'll close them and
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
I have to tell you that learning to coach has been like so helpful because you feel much more confident when you do make suggestions to people. 'Cause
Yeah.
you're not basing it out of ignorance and you're not going to miss, you're not going to send them in a wrong direction.
And I really struggle with this with students still, which our job is to teach and coach. Like that's even in a role I struggle with it where I think having been in the field for so long and I still freelance locally at NBC, like I'm just used to like deadline writing, get the script done, let's get
Yeah.
the script cleaned up, let's get on the
Yeah.
air, let's get our show recorded. And I find myself just because I also don't want to, I feel like I don't want to be hypercritical. I do
Mhm.
feel like sometimes I hold back on giving suggestions because I feel like I'm being
Well,
perfectionist.
but I think that's different because you are teaching also as well as
Yeah.
coaching. And sometimes you're on deadline, so you have to coach after the fact.
Right.
There's coaching that can be done, front end coaching, which is before they go out on the assignment or, and then there's coaching in the middle of it. But oftentimes if you're slamming to get on the air, which is, again, I'll talk about this. If it's an emergency, you're going to jump in and, you're going to repair it. You've got
Yeah.
to. And if you notice and maybe it happens once with one student, but if you see a pattern, then the coaching is on the back end. And so, I'm looking at this as more of you're working with colleagues and, the people I talk with are professionals, they're managers, they're leaders. And so they need less learning than they do decision making. You're working on learning.
That's a good point.
It doesn't mean they don't get excited by their own ideas. They still love their own ideas. It's just helping tease out those ideas so that they remember them, right?
Mhm.
So I think you're doing it just fine.
Okay, good. Thanks. Okay, I'm gonna close the rooms. We'll let them join
Okay.
again. I do think
And
it's a
Paul,
struggle.
and are we set for Paul to say something or you to say something?
Yeah,
to
we'll
wrap
say
up?
something at the end. Yeah.
Okay. I'm so glad they had these breakout rooms.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, now I can see Edith. Hi.
So nice to see people smiling faces. I mean, we know you're behind there, but it's nice to see it. And Joe, we won't need too much time at the end. It'll be quick.
Okay.
So
Just wanted to make sure I save space for you there.
yes.
All right. Got the family back together. Everyone back? Whoop, we got a little last us in. All right. So coaches. Well, first of all, those of you who were stars, who had a good coach? Paul, tell me who was your coach and what did that person do well?
So Josephine was my coach, and we created a pretty fun, I think, scenario, and she just did a really nice job of diffusing and trying to create mutual respect when there was some disrespect going on our team. And she talked through the quest steps just the way you suggested.
Wow. Josephine, as a coach, it's always a little challenging because you don't know what's coming at you. You don't know the story. All you know is what you're able to discern. What were some of the things that you were thinking about as you coached?
Of course, when a prof told me his issue and what he thought was happening to his story, which he wanted to do for on a runner for the Boston Marathon, and one of the other colleagues had insisted that he works with another colleague, and he was feeling like this other colleague who he was being pushed to work with would take away his glory, would take off his story and all that. I asked him to just open up and tell me if there is more than meets the eye. Could there be some other underlying factors that I may not be knowing about between his relationship and the other colleague who was David? Was it David Munyere? And the other colleague was Mary Masinde. So he opened up and said, not really. He has no problem working with Mary, whom David has suggested that they work with. But he feels like in the last story he did, again, David imposed someone to work with him, and this person kind of like stole the thunder from his story. So I told him teamwork is good. Just take it with take it well and see how you can go around it and work with Mary and find a way of having coffee with David and really explaining to him how you feel about him pushing colleagues to work with you when maybe you feel like they steal away your thunder. He suggested that he wanted to buy the coffee, but my view was let David buy the coffee, then you actually tell him what you feel, and sure enough, I think it will work if this goes on.
So Paul, did you feel that Josephine was invested in you in this conversation? How did you come away feeling about your relationship with Josephine?
Very good, because she was busy, but she made time. But what I think Josephine did well was to back up and create space, to recognize quickly that maybe the issue I'm talking about has some deeper roots, and to try to find out what those are, and to create space for me to talk, or to create what those, in this case, to create what the roots were.
Got it. Other stars, who else? Who else?
Let me,
Oh, I'm sorry.
actually, what happened is knocked on the door. I was very busy. And he just came in and said, hey, look here, I'm quitting. I said, what? Okay, he said, hey, do you have some little time? I said, I'm a bit busy. Is it urgent? So he just said, I'm quitting. I said, hey, relax, have a seat. I found time. I was busy.
Yes, good. Oh, perfect. Other stars, who else had a good coach?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a good coach actually. So Jennifer is such a veteran a journalist, and basically I was just it was a kind of real coaching and coaching and relationship. And basically she kind of made me feel I'm a star and acknowledging, the challenges that I was facing about the publishing of the magazine, which kind of was grounded because of COVID and the challenges, the investment of resources, time, money, pressure that put in, and still don't know which direction to take, which platform to take. When I was sharing all this, and she was helping me to understand that since we have gone through all this, the troubled times, the challenging times, and basically there is hope, and there's always good things that are going to come in future. So that was wonderful. So we were only two in the room. So.
Well, you had a bonus. You get private time with Jennifer. Whoa.
Giselle joined in later. So
again, oftentimes it's about relationship building. Some of the best connections we make. And you will find as a coach, years from now, somebody will say, I'll never forget the time we talked about, and you're going to go, I don't remember that. Because for you, it was automatic coaching. You were bringing out, information. But the reason people remember oftentimes is because our memories are often tied to emotion. And so if we feel really good because we discovered something, because we felt better about something, because we got hope, or oftentimes we remember things because they're negative, right? So it's in these moments of discovery that people will say, wow, I felt better about this, even if it's just learning that they didn't have many options and they are taking the best of the limited ones they have. Anyone else have any observations about coaching you want to share before I talk about a little bit more about it? What did you see? What did you experience? Or what do you have a question about?
Okay. Caroline, go ahead.
Carolyn, unfortunately, we have audio problems with you, so perhaps you could put it in the chat room. Or there you go.
Yeah, sorry, I thought Josephine was speaking. Josephine was my coach, Wareta. What I found interesting is that as we converse, then as the coachee, she made me try and explore other options. What options are available. She would ask me, there was this problem, and then she's asking me, whom do you think you can share this with? Have you shared with this person? And I'm like, if you're not comfortable, why? Is there another option? And then it comes back to me. I'm the one now giving the options, and as I talk about it, I'm looking at what can work and what cannot work. And as I'm sharing why I'm uncomfortable maybe with one option, then I also get to understand the challenge better. So I found that to be very interesting. And then I realized, because one of the options was to resign. So I realized that resigning should not even be, in the cards, or not even be a consideration. We have options.
Wow. You accomplished a lot in a short amount of time, Josephine.
Yeah, actually, when she first came in, it was
such a hard time, and she had a fixed mind, this boss is bad and I'm leaving, because who else will I go to? You know, but through the discussion, she would say, well, there's this option, but there's this challenge with that option. And then I would ask, is that the final? Then she would go again, no, I think we can do this and I can do the other. But it brought to mind about handling a difficult case, because some come with a very fixed mind and it's so difficult to tackle it. If you don't have time and you're not patient to go through, you can almost be made into a fixer, or you can almost now have an attitude and throw them out with your attitude of, can't you think, you know, aren't you seeing this is the right thing to do? But it brought to mind that really the cases are not easy all the time, and you really need to think through, have a critical thinking, and just see, where is this person coming from? Is it a matter of a fixed attitude and a fixed perception, or is it something that she's really struggling with? Thank you.
Sounds like you did a terrific job. And I want you all to remember, I'm going to pull the PowerPoint up, but I want you to remember that you had 15 minutes. That's all you had. The conversation that I did as a demonstration was done within the scope of 10 minutes. And I say that because we often think, oh, it's going to take a long time. But once you get into practice, it can change. You can do them swiftly. You can take a lot of time if you feel that this is a subject that really needs it, but you can also learn to coach on the fly. The coaching skills that we know are important to have, let's just recap, are questioning, listening, right? Formulating the good questions, truly doing deep and active listening, critical thinking, which we now know is really the sweet spot of coaching. It is really the probative. And look, you're journalists. You're good at critical thinking already. You don't suspend that when you're coaching, right? In fact, you enhance it when you're coaching. Framing, one person says, framing, I think, was really good when J. Sam Daniels said to me, I don't think I'm being taken seriously. That was a frame. And we can reframe it to, I wonder if there's a more effective way to get my story pitches accepted. That's different than I'm not being taken seriously. Then gently challenging people when they are saying something that you know to have an assumption or a bias within it, that you can figure out how to, in conducting a good coaching conversation, still challenge them, still push back a little bit, but not in a way that insults them or demeans them. And then encouraging them. That is so important, saying, I know you can do this. I believe in you. And the reason that coaching is so important, and I'm referencing a book on decision-making by two scholars, Chip and Dan Heath, and they say that there are villains in our decision-making. We sometimes narrowly frame things. We limit our options. We look at that little red house instead of all the other options that are available. Confirmation bias. We've only talked to people or are favoring information that agrees with our beliefs already. A coach is someone who gently causes you to think beyond everyone who agrees with you. Short-term emotion, presuming that how we feel today is how we're going to feel always. When we walk in and say, I want to quit, the person who sent me that email, for example, she was feeling terrible. And then look at how just one conversation changed her vision, because the person that she had insulted said, you've always been a fair boss. And then there's also overconfidence. We come in presuming I know what the answer is. Even when you talk to a coach, I know what I think I should do. The coach helps defeat your overconfidence. Now, are there times that you should just go ahead and fix? Melissa and I were talking about that. Absolutely. It's an emergency. You're on deadline. The building is on fire. You don't say, how do you define fire? You tell people where the exits are. If time is very short, you're on deadline. I may have to take your story and redo it, but coach you afterwards, because we had to get this out today. If the stakes are very high, if there's high expense involved, if there are legal issues involved, right? If there are other departments involved that only you should take this on, you're not going to push someone out there to take a huge risk that you should be taking, then you take it on. And every now and then you get someone who's impervious to coaching and they say, just tell me, just tell me. All right, there are some people who don't want to think things through, then fine, then they don't get the benefit of your coaching. And how do you find the time? Well, you don't have unlimited time. So you prioritize. Do it by how important the issue is and how important that person is. Your highest performing people, right? The people who you know are more likely to take this and run with it, you may start with them. Practice it. The more you practice, it becomes automatic. You really learn to automatically go to the questions and to go to the critical thinking. And you can do it you can coach on the fly. I do it all the time. I have 1 hour coaching sessions with people. I have 10-minute, 5-minute coaching conversations. And the interesting thing is you habituate. If the people who know you know that you're going to start with questions, I know you're going to ask me questions. So I'm ready for it. So you begin to be known as a coach and people will actually be prepared to answer questions. And then you also have to have a ready answer to got a minute. The answer, sometimes is unlike Josephine who said, I'm busy, but you're going to quit, come on in. That's important. But other times you can say, I have a minute, but you need more than that. I'm sure you deserve more. So here's the time, let's schedule it for, and then you date today or tomorrow or whatever. These are the qualities of a good coach. You have to be approachable. You can't scare people away. Empathy, courage, curiosity, integrity, keeping confidences, right? And resilience, because if you're a good coach, you're going to hear a lot of tough stories. And I need to know that you're taking good care of yourself too. So remember, question, understand, explore, suggest, and trust. And please always remember that the most important thing leaders do is help others succeed. And with that, I turn it back over to Paul and to Melissa.